Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hill for Literacy's Speaker Series webinar. I'm Shira Cohen-Goldberg, Director of Client Services. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Hill for Literacy, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker. At Hill for Literacy, we strive to create a world where every child is a reader. Our mission is to advance equitable literacy outcomes for pre-K to 12 students by equipping educators with the knowledge and skills to deliver high-quality, responsive literacy instruction that meets the unique needs of every child. We are a Massachusetts-based nonprofit founded in 2001 that provides both in-person and technology-enabled consultancy services to states, districts, and schools, with the aim to increase the number of students meeting state reading standards. With over 20 years of experience, the Hill partners with districts not only to make change in literacy practices, but to sustain that change over time. Now, on to our speaker. Maryanne Wolf, welcome, is a scholar, teacher, and advocate for children and literacy around the world. She is the director of the Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice at UCLA in the School of Education and Information Studies at UCLA, and the former John DiBiagio Professor of Citizenship and Public Service in the Elliott Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development at Tufts University.
Yay, Tufts.
Yay, Tufts.
Yay, Boston.
With 2 degrees in English literature and a doctoral degree in human development and reading from Harvard University, she has authored over 170 scientific publications, including Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain, Tales of Literacy for the 21st Century, and Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital Culture. Little bit more, she is co-author with Martha Dankla of the RAN-RAS Naming Speed Tests, a universal predictor of dyslexia, and the creator of the original and new Rave intervention program for all struggling readers, which we hope we will hear a bit about today. A former Fulbright Fellow, she has received multiple awards for her contributions to the neuroscience of reading. She was recently elected a permanent member of the Pontifical Academy of Science. Finally, beyond Maryanne's incredible knowledge and experience, she is genuinely one of the most delightful people you can meet. Hill for Literacy welcomes Maryanne Wolf.
Welcome back, Shira. We have a long relationship, which is so wonderful. And these days when I try really hard to say no, I can never say no to Shira and to the Hill and Ben and all these Marcy Kate and all these wonderful people who are there. So hello to all my friends of the past and the present. It's a joy to be back. So speaking of joy, my title is really about the joy of reading, not the joy of cooking, the joy of reading and the joy of teaching. And it actually has the word rekindle in the title for a very real reason. I keep thinking of what Tolkien said through Gandalf. You might remember this in Lord of the Rings. Said to Gandalf that his task was to rekindle hearts in a world that's grown chill. I like to think of it as rekindling hope and rekindling joy in this world that is growing too chill around us. And some of you may have been with me in New Orleans. There were 3,000 strong, so a few of you might have been there, where my message there and here and in other talks I hope to give this year is about remembering why each of us became a teacher, why you do what you do every single day, sometimes tired, sometimes full of frustration at the great burdens that so many people place on the shoulders of teachers because society hasn't been able to do their job. So I want, no matter what else I do in this talk, to remind you through the science and through the story and through even the new story of the new Rave intervention that some of you in Boston helped do. I will never, ever, ever be more grateful to people like Stephanie Gottwald, Lynn Miller, Terry Binyara, Catherine Donnelly Adams, Amy Ellison, who's working on it now, and Yvonne Gill. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. I know Melissa Orkin is working with us too. So many people in Boston are part of the science and the story that I'm about to talk to you about today. I would be remiss if I didn't take a look at my UCLA campus and at my own center here, our own center here, because we have this, if you will, transcontinental desire to have everybody understand. And now I see it on bumper stickers. Literacy is a basic human right. But we have a very particular view about how that right is to be considered and thought about and conceptualized, if you will. And that is that it's a transformer. It transforms the brain of every child that learns how to read. And when we transform the individual, we are adding to the transformation of society. And very, very importantly, this isn't my talk today, but it's a piece of my thinking often. What do our different mediums in a digital culture do when we teach reading in different ways? How does that change our species? So this whole talk, if you will, is about the beauty of oral and written language and our role as teachers in making it ever more flourishing and elaborated in the brains of our young. And just as Shira said, maintaining it, not just teaching, but propelling it and maintaining it across the lifespan. And that includes us, the teachers. Now, one of my favorite quotes of all time about language, I keep bringing different quotes in different talks, but this one is so important to me. It's from Toni Morrison's Nobel Prize lecture. She said, "Word work is sublime because it is generative. It makes meaning that secures our difference, our human difference. We die. That may be the meaning of life, but we do language. That may be the measure of our lives." And that's what I hope to remind all of you. We who teach, we do language. And that's essential for us as we look at all the changes around us, including the changes to books. And I would also be remiss if I didn't say part of my mission, if you will, is to always talk about how what we do in science gives our children the ability to read stories and books. And even though today's talk isn't about bridging the gap between balanced literacy and whole language and the science of reading, it's there for us to learn about as I talk to you about the science, but that I always talk to you about books. And E.B. White, when asked about Charlotte's Web, said this: "All that I hope to say in books, all that I ever hope to say, is that I love the world." You see, that's part of the author's deep reading and deep writing. The fact that he writes to help people love the world, not just understand it, not just criticize, especially our world today, but to love it. That's something that we need always to remind ourselves of, what we give our young when we give them books, give them a reading sanctuary, what I call a reading home. We are developing the reading home of our young. Now, I wanted to talk to you, like I'm talking to these various audiences this year, about a broader view of the science of reading than what I see is happening. There is no question that phonics and phoneme awareness, we have finally gotten people to realize how important that is. And it's a pendulum swing. Jean Chall always said it'll just swing back and forth. But we have a lot of, if you will, understanding of how important phonics and phoneme awareness are. But they are only one part of the science of reading. And so I find it the most unnatural thing in the world to have to say there's so much more to the science of reading that we need to understand so that our colleagues in balanced literacy and whole language realize we share so much about word knowledge. And so what I want to talk to you about is an expanded understanding of an evolving science of reading. And part of that evolving is that we are knowing so much more about these other parts of what we call foundational skills. There's more to it than that which a lot of people think is the science. The science is bigger and it evolves. And so I use my colleagues from the past. Many of them were in Boston or DC. Norman Geschwind, Jean Chall, some of the absolute best minds in neurology and reading really gave us a whole view of all the things that go into reading. And so we have that we have the neuroscience, we have education, we have psycholinguistics from Isabel Liberman and Don Shankweather and all these amazing Ken Pugh, all these people at Haskins. And then we have our dear friends at NICHD like Reed Lyon and Peggy McCardle and Brett Miller. And then we have the National Reading Panel like Linnea Airy and Joanna Williams. There's so many people that go into the science of reading. It's not one thing, and it should never be reduced to that. And it shouldn't even be reduced. Here's where I'm going to step gently on a few toes. It can't even be reduced to the 5 pillars that are more than 20 years old from the reading panel. As good as they are, what we really see today is how each of those pillars are being expanded over time by the science. So instead of just phonics or just vocabulary and fluency, those words we want to blast open. And I hope to do just a tiny bit of that today, to look at the full continuum of language processes that we need to connect to decode accurately and fluently with understanding. Always remember, Connie Jules said, one of the greatest mistakes of reading interventions is that they assume when a child decodes a word, they know it. We have to put all of that together in our work, in our teaching, and in our intervention. And that includes, some of you have been through some of my, it sounds like a dishwasher or something, but through some of my talks about fluency and an expanded understanding of fluency. We won't have time to do much of that, but I will just say all the things that I'm talking about in expanded foundational skills contribute to fluency. It's not just speed. It's all these other things that influence the speed. It's not the how many words per minute. That's not the only thing you need to think about. We don't want to use science as a hammer. We want to use it as an on-ramp. But I also want to just say one quick thing about when I talk about expanded, I want to expand everything. I want an expanded understanding of the science of reading, foundational skills, and fluency, but also of comprehension, to understand how deep it goes, so to speak. And so I often give these talks that are simply about the reading brain and what it can teach us. But I just want to say 2 quick things that I say in every talk. We weren't born to read. We were born to see and to talk and to eat and all these things. Reading is a new circuit because reading is a new invention. Okay. Now, most of you know I've said this 1,000 times, but it means that the circuit is plastic. And when it's plastic, it changes according to how what language we speak, how we teach, because the circuit reflects the emphases in our teaching, and how different mediums, in fact, change how we read. So that's a really important point, that even if I don't have that in this talk, I hope maybe some of you can hear about maybe a podcast with Ezra Klein that I still love on deep reading. But this is a young brain that has absolutely no genes, no spot, if you will, no region for reading. Rather, it has these regions that were genetically programmed that we as teachers help the child put together to make a new, as Mary Lou Garno-Timpani says, circuit of circuits. Now it's plastic, but it is developing from the start. 0 to 5. I sometimes just love to talk only about that period, because that's when these contributing parts that we will later connect in reading, they're developing. We have to do so much. If I had 2 minutes with parents, it would be speak to your child, sing to your child, and read from 6 months on. Someone said in an OG talk yesterday that or dialogue with them, I said, their favorite line, and I love it, is ideal reading begins under the crook of an arm. Never forget that. We have to read to our children, and that helps build all of these early processes that you really know so much about, especially phonemes and orthography. I don't have to tell any Hill audience about phonemes, so I won't. And I don't have to tell you about the alphabetic principle and learning grapheme phonic correspondence. You know so much about how important it is that children have that cognitive Helen Keller epiphany about the alphabetic principle. At the same time, that principle needs to be including from the start, and I really mean this, a whole different view of vocabulary. Vocabulary is not what you put on Friday to teach spelling. How important that is, great. But it is even more important to develop the semantic networks around words. Now, I work with individuals with dyslexia, many of whom have dysnomia. One of the things you're doing when you are giving these children this wonderful network of knowledge around whatever words you are teaching, you're helping them with for those of you who are having word retrieval problems, they have an extra, if you will, secret sauce for them to have an easier time retrieving an alternative word, because they are learning all the things around words. And as in Rave, we will talk about that really quickly. But I also want a case for polysemy. And I have to do this really fast. I love Virginia Woolf. And she said this so beautifully about why it's important to teach multiple meanings. One of the things we do in Rave is teach polysemy, that words have multiple meanings as a part of their learning how English works. And Virginia said this: we pin them down to one meaning, their useful meaning, the meaning which makes us catch the train. And when words are pinned down, they fold their wings and die. We want living words. We want words to come to life. Words, their meanings, words, their functions. Grammar cannot be overemphasized. And Amy Ellison and Lynn Miller had done all this work on Classroom Rave years ago, in which we really emphasize syntax, and now even more than ever, especially as it helps us connect to stories and text. Understanding the alphabetic principle. You all know how important that is. I will only say one word, especially because in Boston, there are those teachers who have faithfully, zealously believed that kids do best when they induce the alphabetic principle. I'll just say the evidence is so totally against the induction. Some do, of course. Jean Shaw said there will always be children who always, learn to read, regardless of any method. But for so many of our children, they need what Nancy Young calls the lower rungs of the ladder, and Jan Hasbrook. But I also would be, it's just fun for me that the world is now looking to what I said years ago, that morphemes are sexy. I wanted to do that to sort of inspire people to think differently about morphemes. And now I'm being given pins, T-shirts that say morphology is sexy. Well, okay, maybe it not be sexy, but it is the secret sauce to fluency. It gives grammatical function, it gives a semantic marker, and It's these little units that make orthography easier, faster to recognize. So you put all that together, and that's what we do. We put it all together. We connect it. Now, there's an important principle here that will come out in Rave. We must connect it. And I offer you the principles that we call POSSUM, phonology, of course, prosody, phonics, orthography. But we use POSSUM as a way of teaching every single day how the same words can be studied, learned in all their POSSUM capacities. And when those people say, "What's POSSUM?" I say, remember the Latin, to enable. It also can mean I can. And so that's what we want to have people realize is the expanded understanding of foundational skills that underlies fluency. So if we're talking about accuracy and fluency, the connections among those POSSUM parts are what allow us to go into deep reading. Now, I only have 1 or 2 minutes for you to talk about deep reading because I must get to Ravo with delight. But the reality is that deep reading has so many beautiful aspects. I look at my colleague Alberto Manguel, who always talked about how reading is cumulative and builds upon each other. But one of the first things we do is we connect it to what came before. And background knowledge is so essential for our kids. But even more so today, and even if I said not another word, I want to emphasize to you that we who teach reading are teaching empathy. My own teacher, John Donne, used the term passing over, that reading helps us pass over into the thoughts and feelings of others. Our country needs us. Our country needs our teachers and our children to remember that at the heart of our basic values is a desire to use reading as a vehicle to understand others, their perspectives, their thoughts, their feelings, and to become a more, if you will, humane species. So we do an exceptional job when we teach our children that reading helps us learn how others feel and never to think of others as an enemy, but as a group of people. We are others, that we're all together. And part of our job as human beings is to learn about each other's history, feelings, etc. The second and equally important thing for us as teachers is to teach critical thinking. We are awash in the attacks on truth. Critical thinking is our way from the start of teaching kids to think when they read and to evaluate for truth. There has never been so many efforts to use disinformation and misinformation to mislead people to agree with something that isn't true. Now, I'm not speaking politically. I'm speaking across the board cognitively. We need we need our teaching to do that very special thing. And when we do, we end up giving our children that sanctuary, that home for their best thought. Now, I have a paper that I'm going to send to Shira the minute it's got to have a better diagram. But what I want to give people, I'm going to give 2 gifts away. One of them is this paper. The Shanker Institute is going to publish it. American Educator will publish a version of it. But it's really thinking about how we've got all these foundational skills. This is that elbow, but it's always connected to story. And then as this becomes automatic, this goes on top. And then we give all these more emphasis, but to comprehension, deep reading processes, but never without foundational skills, which change over time with grammar and syntax. Now, I wrote an article with my whole group about what the new definition of dyslexia should have. And I'm only going to say 2 things about it. We always need to really talk about the risk and protective factors, knowing all this social, emotional information about our young, and heterogeneity. I cannot emphasize enough. My former PhD student, I hope she will listen to this, maybe, or someone will tell her, Ola Ozernoff-Palchik and Nadine Gabb and John Gabrielli, all these wonderful Bostonian people, Elizabeth Thorne, who's now at Northwood. We all were doing this work in which we saw from the start the heterogeneity of our children. It's not just phoneme awareness. It's not just RAN, even though I love that there's a separate subtype for RAN. But we have a heterogeneity because the brain has many parts. And we who deal with that heterogeneity, not just in our children with dyslexia or individuals, but with all kinds of ways our kids are struggling post-COVID and English language learners, we have to understand that our interventions will do best if they think in terms of heterogeneity and they think about the major processes, the possum processes in the circuit. And I have just a few things that I want you to know. And as I've incorporated them in the new Ravo, but it is to know without question to have multiple component parts there. First, because it is what the reading brain needs to do. Second, because that will allow us to look at areas through our, whether we call them possum checks or just checks on the components, to see what the kids need in our ongoing monitoring. So but remember, no hammers, on ramps. So when things need emphasis, our interventions can be flexible and pivot, not ever neglecting all those components, but to give more as we go along. Now, our goal here is therefore to really give interventions that embody the principles of the reading brain, in essence, go after those expanded foundational skills, go after fluency, go after expanded deep reading processes. So what we're really doing is connecting science and story. That's the subtitle of the new Ravo. I want people to realize it's not either or, it's connection. It's like E.M. Forster, I always love that quote, only connect. Now, I'm connecting actually 2 decades and 2 teams with the older Ravo and the classic Ravo, where, as I said, Lynn Miller, Amy Ellison, Catherine Donnelly, Adams, Terry Bernard, oh my God, Yvonne Gill. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. Oh, Kathleen Biddle, for heaven's sakes, who did so much of the NICHD research. And Stephanie Gottwald was also a coordinator for this research. We cannot thank that team enough. And now I'm going to show you some of that data and what we've learned in between, and in a new Office of Special Education grant, learned how to do an ever better Ravo. So what I want to show you is that what we were trying to do in NICHD is to look at multi-component interventions. Multi-component was not a word. We kind of invented it, but it's our best. In fact, Robin Moore said, oh my God, people won't like that word. And now they do. Well, why? Because that's what helps us help people understand. It's not just phonics. It's not just phonics awareness, but it's never without. So our job is to connect components. Now we do it in, Maureen Lovett's work on Empower is fabulous. So whatever I say about Ravo, I want to say that the research is so positive about both programs. And what we were trying to do is say, okay, what if we study our very good phonics program, the one that Maureen was always using before, and we add to it. And so she added in the Empower a lot of metacognitive strategies and went after basically P, O, and M. We wanted to be sure the full possum. So Ravo, it reflects a lot more work on semantic syntax and morphology, as well as phonics. But we're both after fluency and automaticity. And more recently, we are totally devoted to understanding how we can make our minute stories many, many more stories and chapter books, ever more helping our children with deep reading. So the new Ravo is really the principles of the older one. And what we're basically saying is it's possum, fluency, and deep reading. That's what it really is. But it's using one set of words, core words, to teach the phonemes in it, the orthographic, so it's phonics, but it's analytic phonics and synthetic phonics, and then always the meanings. In fact, we begin with meanings, the elicitation of meanings. So the kids are involved, their language is involved. Syntax, much more emphasis in syntax than ever before, and morphemes. Okay, all of that within 2 days is connected to stories. And this is really important. The story connection, it's science plus story within 2 days with the same words and the same words used in their various meanings and their various syntactic functions. So the dog tracks, the tracks by the tracks. Not the most beautiful English literature you've ever heard. I know, Shira said I had 2 degrees. Okay. They're the best stories for helping us learn how to use words. And this is especially important for all the multilingual learners we have in Massachusetts and California. Now, who are they for? It was originally tier 3, and we think that's the sweet spot. But post-COVID, there are so many kids, I call them the 2.5s, who can really benefit. And those who are 2 and can, if you will, speed through this, so pacing is really important, can be very helped. But they will be helped and probably be finished in 1 year. It's going to be a 3-year program. We have modules. Each module is about, well, it could be about 6 months. So we have 3 modules now. We'll have ultimately 6 because we want to have a 3-year program. We want the kids who are identified and the kids who are suspected of having dyslexia. So we love the emphasis on screeners. We're in Massachusetts, in fact, there are several schools that have asked us to pilot the use of Rave for multilingual learners. We can't say we have the evidence. We have observations by teachers who say the kids who get Rave learn English better than the kids who don't. But that's an observation. We're working with Claude Goldenberg and Elsa and Linda Casavos to ultimately see whether we will make a Ravo that's for multilingual. That's in the drawing boards right now. In fact, my next talk right now, right after you, is with Claude. Who, what, where? There's 30-minute sessions so that the kids who get Ravo can either have it autonomously or with all our beautiful colleagues in OG and Wilson and other great programs, that they can be paired. And so we have, thanks to Amy Ellison, who is such a genius teacher. She has a whole way of putting the Ravo with all these other very good programs. So we have placement assessments. Obviously, you need that. And we have all kinds of monitoring that we do every week and after every module. The research is huge. As I said, what we wanted to see is what would happen if we compared phonics, just really good phonics, with Maureen's program or mine. And what you see is what you get. The phonics, of course, does well, but when you add the multi-component, you have better results. Now think of that. It's because you're working on these other aspects of word knowledge. And so we have better results in vocabulary. And if you look at that third one, this is a polysemy test of all things. You see, not only are they better that year on the trained words, they are better on generalization to untrained words, not just that year, but the year after. So it's a beautiful result. And as Jack Fletcher said, people don't realize how good your research was because, it was in these journals, if you will, that a lot of reading researchers read, but not enough teachers. But now we're just coming outside and saying, look at the results. The results, if you look at the phonics, it's great, it's good, but multi-component is better. And the results, we think, should be enough to convince anyone to go beyond what they're doing, never to neglect it, but to add to it, to complement it. And so we're working with, in Massachusetts, Melissa Orkin and her group in Crafting Minds to train Ravo. I'm just going to give you a 1 minute, 2 minute version of what you do when you do it. So it comes a bit to life. It doesn't begin with phonology. And this and Melissa really convinced me to do this because so many of the teachers, and oh my gosh, Oh gosh, Erica. Oh, all these wonderful teachers, and Carol and Windward and Landmark who are helping us, and AIM. Oh my gosh, there's so many teachers from who are piloting it this minute and helping us. And one of the absolute foundational things was uh, you have to begin with the kids loving language. And so we use semantics and we use Ms. Mim. Some of you may remember Ms. Mim. I'm not sure. There will be a few people. I don't know if I have a picture of her. I wish I had a picture. Maybe I'll go back. You have to have a picture of Ms. Mim. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. But there she is. We use Bette Midler in my mind as an example. This is Mayor Mick. And Ms. Mim teaches that a word can have as many meanings as she has legs. And Mayor Mick is really semantic network, how words are connected to each other. So we use metacognitive strategies of these characters who we love, and we have new characters, but we begin with meaning. And then quickly, immediately, we then look at basically analytic phonics through the sounds. And we then go into synthetic, from analytic phonics to synthetic. And with the synthetic, we are using some of the color coding things that people have done for years. I learned at Harvard Reading Lab. I don't, Catania was it, Words and Colors, something I can't remember. But things that Jean Shaw said years ago, we have incorporated, including the Curiton Action Program. Some of you may remember. Of course, we're adding the linguistics. We can't ever neglect psycholinguistics. So what we're really doing here is teaching rhyme patterns and starters. And then sometimes we have the kids act out, jamming the rhyme and slamming the starter. And that goes all the way back to Jean Shaw's Harlem program that she had us learn called Action. I don't know if any of you ever heard of it, but we're resurrecting some of the motor movement. A lot of work is going into demonstrating how the strengths of kids can be used in our activities. So we have charades. We even have a musical version of Rave, which I dare not sing, but I'll just say the chorus is Rave Town. Okay, that's the Western song. But the reality is what we're doing always is teaching our children all the ways a word works. And so here we see our morphemes. Love those morphemes. And we have ender benders. Some of you may remember that. And we have beginner benders. But the reality is if you teach just a set towards morphology, you are helping kids get ever more fluent by looking at the units, so that a long word like rocking is like 3 orthographic represented units. So think linearity and orthographic mapping. And then I can't ever emphasize enough, and some of you know that a lot of this work on syntax goes all the way back, not to Noam Chomsky, but to Carol Chomsky, who taught us how syntax develops over time. And that's part of what we're doing in our stories. We're making sure, remember, within 2 to 3 days, all the words that they're learning, these core words, are used in stories and in their different syntactic functions as well as their different semantic. Now, here's my favorite new character. In order to, some of you might remember we used to have a think thrice strategy for think ahead, think back. Well, we've now changed it to TLEX. And TLEX stands, remember, we're connecting the past with the present or the future. Think ahead is the right head of TLEX. Think back. Now, think ahead, of course, is your prediction strategies. Everybody knows those. And think back are the strategies that you know, character setting, all that. But the middle one is think for yourself. And TLEX, Trithinkosaurus Lex, teaches the children to respect their own thinking, their own insights. So we begin a day or a lesson with the elicitation of what they know about words, and we end in those stories with eliciting their best thoughts. That's our Proustian gift, if you will, to help instill in our young empathy, critical analysis, and connections to their own background knowledge. So TLEX, it was an insomniac attack. My team in Boston and my team in California knows these are This is what happens. You can't, the imagination just keeps going at night. And Telex was one of my favorite, if you will, gifts. Now, I actually have two gifts for you. The first gift, I'm going to send Shira the minute I have it back from the Shanker Institute with a better diagram. I'm going to send you the elbow room paper. But I also been working with my California colleagues on modules on dyslexia. We are just now working on the last one, which is what is the instruction that will be expanded foundational skills. So Rave has helped me immensely help others by learning the principles that will help every teacher. It's actually involved in all of these modules on dyslexia, whether it's screening and assessment, language processes. These aren't all written by me. They're edited by me and Sue Sears, but they're a whole collaborative across California that we want to give you them. And here is something for you just to take a quick QR look at that. I know Shira, I promised I would stop here. So Shira, I'm going to give you this and this so they can write me because I went so fast. But the QR and the what they can do if they want to find out about Ravo is yours. But now, Shira, it's your turn. Oh, Shira, I can't hear you. I can't hear. Oh, no.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me all right?
Oh, good. I didn't want to miss your questions. Oh, my goodness.
You're not doing the lip reading, I guess, today. Okay, so thank you so much. Your talk was so inspiring and delightful and also informative around this new iteration of Ravo. As just note to the audience, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but we really welcome your putting questions into the Q&A because I'll ask a few of my own questions and then we'll have a look at what you have for us. So I first wanted to start with just talking a little bit about Ravo and this new iteration that includes this deep reading.
Yes.
And so I was hoping you could speak a little bit more about the importance of deep reading for our emerging readers.
You know, one of the things that I learned about in writing Reader Come Home, the reading brain in a digital culture, digital world, was that deep reading is a way of having us lift up, if you will, the hood of comprehension and look at all the processes that are involved within it. So letters 3 and 4 in that book, for those people who want to know more, really goes into the extraordinary importance of connection to background knowledge. This is actually analogical reasoning, looking at what you know and what the new information is, and then inferring. So analogical reasoning, inferential reasoning is going on when we make this connection between what you know and what's in front of you. Now, the other extremely important ones involve perspective taking. Now, I talked about passing over and empathy. I cannot emphasize enough how our young, if we look at even some of the research at Stanford on the decline of empathy in our young, we have to fight it. And books are the most beautiful vehicle for the enrichment of empathy and for fighting, thinking about others as different, and if they're different, they are, somehow taking things away from us. We have a national plague that is attacking empathy, and that's polarization. I want to get rid of polarization. My family were Republicans in the Midwest. I never told anybody, but they were for Barry Goldwater, for heaven's sakes, and Reagan. Obviously when I went to Boston, I changed. But it's not about change of the basic values. Empathy is a basic human value, and it's not to be polarized. Others are not to be polarized. So I'm not taking this as a political argument, even though I just said this. I'm just saying that politics have brought polarization instead of the beautiful need for empathy and critical analysis in our young. And when I say critical analysis, I mean the evaluation of truth, the evaluation of whose perspective. Is this something that's true? Is it misleading? How can we help our children think? Thinking and writing also are part of that picture, because writing is thinking. Deep reading is thinking. They're inextricably bound. Now, I know I only wish I could speak even more about deep reading, but what we do in Ravo, and I'll give only one example, is we've rewritten some of the minute stories in the first module. It's hard to do that in the first module, but as the second and the third and the fourth emerge, more and more emphasis on empathy, more and more emphasis on background knowledge with nonfiction stories, more and more emphasis on critical thinking, mysteries, inference. But I'll give you the one example. It's one of my favorite stories. Again, Insomnia Attack. Meg and Lil. Meg is a African-American girl who lives in a wheelchair. She is a absolute brilliant writer, reader, speller. Her best friend, Meg, is dyslexic. She can run and do everything with her legs, but she can't read. We have Meg learn from Lil the strategies in Ravo. But by the end, what Lil teaches Meg is that Lil has wings in her mind thanks to reading, and Meg has wings on her legs. And together they can go to the moon. But it's a story that involves, learning about what a precious thing reading is. It gives wings to the mind. And Lil teaches that. And of course, their empathy. Again, we have cross-species differences. I've got a new set of stories called, Marie Barzilai is working on that. Some of you know Marie from Israel. So, and Tommy Katsir is going to probably use them too. But anyway, all these people, they're helping us write these stories. And Marie's writing dog and frog stories. Forgive me, frog and toad. These are dog and frog. And my son, the dyslexic son, Ben, is illustrating some of them with his dog that looks more like a kangaroo than a dog, mind you, but it's a dog and frog stories. So we've got all these ways that deep reading has, if you will, infused the new program.
Thank you so much for that. And for the talk about empathy, which we all know we must continue to develop in ourselves and also our students and personal children. So I just want to shift a little bit because I'd like to hear your insights about how we can support multi-language learners in our schools and classrooms. Yeah. We have huge populations of wonderful, wonderful children, some of whom have reading disabilities, some of whom are typically developing as readers. And we really are working to serve this population. Definitely. So what insights can you provide to us?
Shira, I usually don't get a chance to say this, but one of the unknown aspects in the creation of Ravo, both versions, is the desire to teach how the English language works. So when we talk about that reading brain, we're really talking a lot about word knowledge. And so one of the major aspects in the new one in particular, in part because being in California has just thrust me in the midst of so many multilingual kids, Spanish, Korean, Chinese, it's amazing. And what we have learned is that, and again, this is observational. We are working with people like Claude Goldenberg and Elsa Carderos, all these wonderful ELL scholars. But what we are working with right now are the observations of teachers. First, we have observations in Phoenix, Arizona, where the teachers say the kids who learned Ravo learned English better. That was a great beginning. But after the OSEP grant, I realized we have to do much, much more about syntax, about learning that words can have multiple meanings. So we're teaching the kids how English works. And that's, it's for every English learner, and everybody's an English learner. It's not just that we have our multilingual learners who are English learners. English is a piece of work. Not very few teachers realize that teaching 4 morphemes gives almost 40 to 60% of the words with morphemes the kids in the primary grades. So you're teaching these principles that will help them regardless of what they come in knowing. So, and then we have, if you will, I didn't talk about this. We have what are called embedded professional development in the new Ravo. And by that, I mean, I'm writing letters from the author about some of these topics, including how English works is essential for all our kids. The heavy emphasis on the SSUM and not only the PO is part of that, but equally important, how do these words work in connected text? Because you can teach all this in the science part of the decoding at the word level, but we believe you want to take those same words and apply all that they're learning in connected text. So the early stories are very, very simple. The bats with a bat, right? Pretty basic. But over time, the clauses that the kids need to learn. And one of the things in our letters to the author, from the author, is that we ask the teacher to be aware of the particulars of the other language that a child may speak. They don't, by and large, they won't speak that other language, but they can learn about how many phonemes, are there different phonemes, how many ways that syntax might work differently in that other language, so that they are aware of some very basic differences as they teach Ravo.
Thank you. Okay, I want to shift actually to a question that I think many of us have in our minds as we've spent some time with the 2024 NAEP scores.
Yes.
And so these show, just for the group out there, the audience, reading scores are down nationally, both in 4th and 8th grades, and no state saw reading gains in either grade compared to 2022. And so this is of great concern for all of us who go to great lengths to both learn and use evidence-based instructional materials and practices.
Yeah.
So a couple questions. First, what do you think is going on? And we know about the pandemic. So if that's part of it, please tell us what you think about that. And also, what do we do about it?
Okay. This is a question that causes all of us to pull our hair out. The reality is that any complex question has a complex set of answers. There's no one answer to it. The first is that we definitely have COVID refugees. If you look at those years lost, it's immense amount of learning lost. It's for some kids, it's as much as 2 years lost. But then you have to ask, what are those 2 years that they lost? So it's not just you losing 2 years, it's 2 years of fundamental foundational skills. And so it's that which I will say that we have been flummoxed by people who have written us. My son David Wolf Noam is the oh God, I can't believe I'm working with my own son. Both of my sons. It's funny. But anyway, what he keeps getting these letters, let us work with 5th graders and 6th graders. And I say no. And he says yes, because they need it. And he's right. And so, but I'm right, because I don't want them to have baby stuff. So Amy Ellison is helping to create a version that's not a primary version. It has the same primary skills they have to learn, but it will have different characters, older characters, so that no one feels this is baby stuff. But the reason why I start with that is that there were so many requests for Ravo for older kids. And I was like, oh no, but it really is because of what they missed. Not just that they missed, but what they missed. So we want to do a catch up, if you will. The second major factor to me is the obvious one, and that is teaching methods. We are still in the midst of the unnatural, unnecessary, physiologically, pedagogically, if you will, I don't want to use the unnice, but it's like, please, we have to go beyond the binary polarization of our field. It's still there. I had to work today on a letter because some of our teachers in California only want to do 3Qing, and I understand what they're doing and why, but they just are uncomfortable with science. And so I really want to hope that we can make science more palatable, especially since it is broader and evolving than the narrow definition that a lot of people have it. So the number 1 and 2 are COVID and in methods that don't work. Number 3 is, I believe, our digital saturation of time by our young. They are not reading after school. They are on social media. The amount of times our adolescents is about 40% of their daylight hours are going into social media, which averages into 3 months of school time. So we have digital influences that are evaporating places and times that might have been used to help us teach reading in different ways. We want, and I always want to say, make it joyous. Rave is in this little company called Nido, and Nido Learning, and Nido means nest. We want to build reading nests for our kids. We want them to go to a place where they feel at home and where they learn. And that really worries me, that those 3 things happen. Now, what are we doing right? Well, look at Louisiana. Look at Louisiana. It was on the bottom of the bond. I just came back from New Orleans, and I worked with Kelly Butler and Dr. Wright, who then went to Maryland, Tenet Smith, all these people who did beautiful jobs in Louisiana, but not overnight. This is important to emphasize when you look at those NAEP scores. Louisiana went from the very bottom to, I think it's 32nd now, but it just leapfrogged through what seems like impossibility to turn an entire state around. They turned it around through years of work with communities, with teachers, superintendents, and with teachers using the science of reading. So I look at that as a proof, exhibit A, of what we're doing right, but it's not, this is what always, this is a problem that's exacerbated in a digital culture. We are cognitively impatient. We want to see something that happened overnight. And I've even seen that at Plain Talk, where teachers were coming up and said, oh, my kids aren't doing words permitted by January, so I'm switching methods, or switching. I'm like, guys, this is really, there is no hammer. There is no silver bullet. There is good hard work, and we have to pace and differentiate. And we have to know when we've done it too much, too long, and it's not working. We have to be humble here. Oh my gosh. There's the best OG teacher I ever met in my life is in Lexington. And Mary, I don't want to embarrass you by saying your name, but Mary, you will know who you are. And she helped teach me, because she taught my son, Ben, how you have to differentiate according to the learner. And so you can't do anything for 3 years if it's not working. But you also can't stop after 3 months because you haven't gotten to some beautiful word per minute. Please, common sense. Careful look at your learners, careful look at their environment, and think for yourself, you teachers you use science as an on-ramp, not a hammer.
Okay. Thank you, Maryanne. We're almost about out of time. I just wanted to share my gratitude with you to you for joining us. So many of us joining you today came to teaching due to our love of children and helping them grow. And you said earlier that we're developing the reading home of our young, and we will carry that with us. So in closing, I just want to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar. We can also put up the QR code again, which you requested in the chat. The webinar was recorded, and we'll be sending it to everyone who registered tomorrow. So our next speaker series webinar will be Tanya Wright, actress from Orange is the New Black and author of the book series Harriet of Harlem. This will be on April 3rd. Registration will open later this week, so keep an eye on our social media for details. And if you'd like to learn more about Hill for Literacy and the resilience that it takes to do this for a very, very long time and get results, you can click on the link above the video to visit our website, hillforliteracy.org. And finally, if you're an educator who is looking for summer training in the science of reading, we'll be announcing our summer open enrollment offering soon. So stay tuned and follow us on social media. But don't have your teenagers follow us on social media. Just you, the grown-ups.
Just you. Thank you, Shira, and thank you, Ben, and Marcy Kate, and everybody. I miss Boston because of people like you, but together we are reading warriors.
Yes, we are. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Shira. It was
Bye
great to see you again.